Salvete omnes et bene venistis. Welcome back. In this video, we will be covering Vergil's Aeneid, Book 1, lines 34 to 49. And before we begin, let's just have a quick reminder about our color coding. We have our subjects labeled in red, our objects labeled in blue, and the verbs that connect the two labeled in green. And as always, hopefully that will make reading everything and keeping up with the main thoughts of each sentence easier. So with that said, let's do this. We are starting off now just after the introduction to the entire epic, and so now we are joining the action in medias res with a place. All right, so we start off vix e conspectu siculae telluris. Okay, so we have an adverb here, vix, this is an adverb, and then we have a prepositional phrase that extends e conspectu siculae telluris, from the site of the land of Sicily. All right, siculae telluris are genitives modifying conspectu and all part of the prepositional phrase. Scarcely out of sight of the land of Sicily. And then we get another prepositional phrase describing where we are going. In altum, into the deep. Accusative, therefore placed to where, right? Into the deep, into the sea. All right, so we know now right away that even though we don't know who our subjects are yet, we haven't gotten there, we are sailing. All right. And then we continue on and we see the main action. Vela dabant, which is our verb and our object, which when put together, vela is just a sail, or the sails, neuter plural, here with the a, neuter plural. And dabant means to give, but not in this context. In this context, put together with vela, it means something like to set the sails, to unfurl the sails, something like that. And we see that they were doing it in the past, the imperfect tense. They were setting the sails, and then we find out who they were right here with laeti. All right, our subject. They, plural, happy. All right, we might also say happily, because that's fine. So we know it's the Trojans. The Trojans happily set the sails, scarcely out of sight of the land of Sicily, heading in towards the deep. And the foam of the sea, this salis here is a genitive going with spumas. The foam of the sea, with their bronze, this aere, this is an ablative of means. With their bronze, they were rushing, okay, rushing, moving quickly. So we might say they were rushing along the foam of the sea. They were rushing through the foam of the sea with their bronze. Okay, so they're sailing. Cum Juno. So we see that this cum here is not followed by an ablative. Juno is nominative. So we know straight away that this cum does not mean with, preposition. This cum probably means when. It could mean because or although, but if that's the case, we'll figure that out and change it later. So when Juno, and then we get into this long phrase here that covers the rest of the line that describes Juno. Okay, and we're going to start off with servans because that's what's actually referring to Juno. Juno is servans. This is a present active participle, so she is preserving or saving, okay, or tending the aeternum vulnus, the undying wound. And then this little prepositional phrase, sub pectore, which literally means under her chest, but in context we know means in her heart, or something like that. When Juno, who is tending that undying wound in her heart, she, and then we don't actually have a verb here, right? Where did the verb go? There is no verb, so what Vergil needs us to do is supply one. Now, normally, when a verb is missing, we supply est. We think of esse. But in this context, since Juno is about to begin speaking, we have to supply something probably like dixit. Okay, she said these things, right? This hike here is the object, neuter plural. So she said these things, secum, prepositional phrase, literally with herself, but in English we might say to herself. All right, and the hike here is looking ahead to what she's about to say, and we will see this a lot in Vergil when people speak. There's typically a hike when it begins, and there's a talia or a talis when it ends, and we will see that when we're through here. So let's have a look at what Juno is saying. So when we dive into what Juno is saying, right away we notice that she is using the accusative case, and your note says that this is because she is exclaiming. In Latin, when we are surprised, we have a sudden exclamation, oh my gosh, etc., we use the accusative case. And so that is what Juno is doing. She has just seen something that has completely surprised and shocked her, and so she cries out in the accusative case. And as you can see from these infinitives, the basic structure then is like indirect speech, right? Where the accusatives are the subject of the infinitives, which are the verbs. So, and we also notice the ne here tells us that this is in fact a question, and we know that even before we get to the question mark down here. So, am I, and then we see victim going with me, defeated, supposed to stop? We need to get to desistere somehow in our translation, right? So, should I, defeated, stop or cease from what has been begun? So this incepto is a perfect passive participle from incipere, to begin, and it is also an ablative of separation because of desistere. So to stop from what has been started. So should I, defeated, stop what I have started? You might say in your translation. And, still the me, am I not able? And then, of course, we see posse, and so we got to jump to the infinitive that goes with it. Am I not able to turn away the king of the Trojans? All right, so we see this, we see tecrorum right here. That genitive is going with regem, because that makes the most sense. Am I not able to turn away the king of the Trojans from Italia? Another ablative of separation. That is her question, right? That is her question. And then we come down here to this very, very short statement, quippe vetor fatis. Now, quippe is a tricky word. It doesn't really mean one thing in particular, but instead it has a sense, you might translate it as of course, or something like that. But the tone is very important. The tone here is somewhat sarcastic and disbelieving, all right? So it's not of course, like I agree. It's, oh, of course, of course. Of course, I, vetor, first person singular, passive verb from veto, I am forbidden by, an ablative of means or agent, the fates. Of course, I am forbidden by the fates, right? As if she can't believe her bad luck. Now let's continue on here. We can see her next question. We see it's a question right away with the ne. Pallas, and we know Pallas is Athena or Minerva in Rome. Pallas, and then in order to get to exurere, this infinitive, we have to come down here to potuit, right? So we go to potuit first, and then we jump from potuit to exurere. And then after that, we'll jump to submergere. All right? Pallas was able, question mark, right? Pallas was able to do what? To burn or burn completely or destroy the fleet, classem, argivom. Now, the note tells you that this is a syncopated or abbreviated form of the genitive plural argivorum, so of the Greeks or of the Argives. Pallas was able to burn the fleet of the Argives, and the second thing she was able to do, to drown the men themselves, right? We notice the masculine gender here, and we know that it is referring to the argivom that we were just talking about. To drown the men themselves in the deep, all right? Just an ablative of place where, no tricks. And then this whole last line is one gigantic prepositional phrase that is triggered by this preposition right here, ob, which wants an accusative. So the objects of ob are right here with noxam et furias, right? On account of, we'll start here, on account of the sin and anger of, and then on the outside, right, we have this one man, Unius, Ajax, right, Oilean Ajax. Okay, which if we remember our Iliad, Oilean Ajax was little Ajax. Okay, so Pallas got to do all this, she says. And then we continue on with Pallas, right? This ipsa is still Pallas up here. She, and then just like before with Juno, when she was servansing, right, her aeternum volnus, we see the same structure here. Pallas was hurling or hurled. This is a perfect passive participle, but the verb that it comes from is deponent, so it is actually active when we translate it. So she hurled the flashing fire. We could say rapid, but it oftentimes means flashing. The flashing fire, then we got to come all the way back to Jovis of Jupiter, and we understand that, of course, is lightning, from the clouds. Place from where? From the clouds. And then we continue on, still with Pallas. Pallas disjecit the rates and evertit the iquora. So what did Pallas do as she hurled the lightning from the clouds? She scattered the ships. Rates is just a fancy word for naves. She scattered the ships, and, in fact, the que tells us it's a both-and situation. So she both scattered the ships and overturned the waves, or the water, or the ocean, with the winds. So this is by means of the winds. Okay? So these are the two things that Pallas did. And then we move away from Pallas and we move to Illum, the man. And if we remember the context, we know that this is Ajax. And he is now the object of a verb, and we will find that verb down here with corripuit. So this is what Athena did. Athena snatched up the man, right? We can jump back here, and then everything else that follows, all of this right here, is triggered off of expirantem, and it refers to the man. What was the man doing? He was expirantem, present active participle. He was breathing out, and then since it's a participle, right, even though it's already an object, it can take an object, and that's what flammas is, because it is present active like a verb. He was breathing out fire from, because expirantem, from his pierced, transfixo, chest, pectore. All right, pectore. So this whole phrase is describing Ajax. We see him breathing fire out of his pierced chest, probably pierced by the lightning bolt. And she snatched him up, ablative of instrument or means, with a whirlwind, or in a whirlwind. You could do in a whirlwind. That's also fine. This ablative could be construed a couple different ways. Okay? And, linking the corripuit with infixit, she basically stabbed him, or, threw him, transfixed him. Now, we're going to say onto, because of this in. She transfixed him on a sharp rock. But an important thing to note about this scopulo acuto is that this word is not ablative like it looks like. It is dative because of the prefix on this verb. We remember in Latin, prefixed verbs can, they do not have to, but they can take datives, acting more or less like an object. All right, in this case, it's more like where she put him, but the dativeness is set up by the infixit. All right, and that is the end of that. Now let's come to the end of Juno's complaint. Ast ego, but. This is a very strong but. It's just a form of ot, right? If we pretend this S is not here, we see ot, which is but. But I, and then straight into quai, which has ego as its antecedent, who go forth. Now I'm saving Regina here for a second. It is nominative, but hold on. Who go forth as, because this Regina is acting kind of like a predicate nominative, as the queen of the gods. This is another syncopated genitive plural, divorum. So I who go forth as the queen of the gods, and, she adds, I am Jupiter's, because this is genitive, sister and bride, wife, if you like. So, una cum gente, with one race, prepositional phrase, the cum is in the middle, tot annos, for so many years. This is an accusative duration of time. I wage war. So I have waged war with one people for so many years. And then, here we come to the end, and who at all, subjunctive, would worship the spirit of Juno? Who would worship the spirit of Juno afterwards or after this? Or, still the quisquam, who, as a suppliant, will, this is actually future, will place a sacrifice upon the altar. And again, note, aris is dative because of the prefixed verb imponet. It looks ablative, but it is dative. And that is the end of this video. We will be continuing on in the next. Walete.